They were in the past. They haven't been on in years. But two things. I feel better knowing that you've done some. And I think the regular pros seem a whole lot easier after you've done the All right, so as I said, today and tomorrow we'll take a look at chapters 10 to 15. Some things certainly moving forward, probably more so tomorrow, we'll kind of link back to events that happened in prologue through chapter 9, although we certainly might start to hit on some of those things today. But keep in mind, there is like that circular boomerang repetition, history is a spiral kind of concept where ideas will be coming back. So it's not that the scenes are going to be exactly the same, but kind of keep an eye out for parallels that you kind of see between multiple scenes that might otherwise not seem to be linked together. But when you start putting some details in, you do start to see some correlation that takes place. But anytime, start about chapters 10 through 15, have to start with Liberty Paint Factory. Why is he going there? He needs a job, and this is going back to chapter 9, but who tells him that he can get a job there? This is Emerson. Emerson is the one who said, hey, I can kind of hook you up with a place where you can get a job. Young Emerson, not the Emerson that the letter was originally written to. Remember, Ellison's name is Ralph Waldo Ellison, and he is named after Ralph Waldo Emerson. And one of the tenets of Emerson's writings is the whole idea about being self-reliant, take care of yourself. So part of him being able to get a job certainly would be kind of filling in with being self-reliant, kind of taking care of yourself. And this is where, not just this scene, but really this kind of point in the book, you do start to see a little bit of shift within Tim, a transition where he's still naive in a lot of ways, but he does kind of start to change from a personality standpoint, become a little bit more vocal. And tomorrow we'll kind of get into the eviction scene when he starts speaking out when the couple's getting kicked out of their home, or he's taking a little bit more of a stance on some things, as well as some other examples. But remember, Emerson has kind of suggested that he goes here. The workers at the paint factory are on strike. So they're hiring scab workers to kind of fill in the role, and a lot of those scab workers are going to be blacks who aren't going to be working necessarily full-time, but kind of fill in the jobs while other workers are contemplating strike or going on strike, which is kind of being worked out by some places. What do we know about Liberty Paints? Whether it be slogans or things that are going on? Okay, they have very strong white paint. There's two slogans that we kind of associate with Liberty Paints. One of them was on your quiz that Lucius talks about. If it's optic white, it's the right white. And then did anyone catch the other slogan that's kind of like at the beginning of the chapter on the building itself? No. Keep America pure with Liberty Paints. So Brockway is the one who has coined this phrase. Remember what he got for the phrase? He got money.
$300.
How much? $300. He got $300 for coming up with the phrase, and then you have Keep America Pure with Liberty Paints. This is more of like the company slogan, the official slogan. Any subtle underlying messages coming through with those two sayings.
All white thing, white is right.
And Ellison is kind of punning off of phrases that have been taking place throughout really the last 50 to 60 years when this is getting published in in about 1950, 1951, where there's common phrase, white is right, when dealing with race, so kind of tweaking that a little bit. What about this one? Keep America pure with Liberty paints. When you think of liberty, what do you think of? Freedom, Statue of Liberty, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So there is certainly some allusion kind of taking place to American government. Keep America pure. Shelby, I think it was your voice that didn't say pure initially, but said keep America white, which really, from the government viewpoint of the era of the day, would basically be the same thing. So there certainly are some very, very strong racial viewpoints, undertones taking place. The logo of the paint company is a screaming eagle. So you have, again, United States, bald eagle, things of that nature being tied in with the nation being assumed with, or being associated with Liberty paints. I like drawing paint buckets, so I'm going to draw a paint bucket. We'll put Liberty paints. Little shadow. What goes into the paint? 10 drops.
Dope. Put 10 drops of dope.
Yeah, they call it the doping agent.
Good job, brother.
The 10 drops go in. What happens to the paint?
Then it becomes white.
It becomes even like a brighter white. So it's already like this white kind of shade once you mix it in, and then you throw in the drops. Initially, it does change colors where it kind of gets a little gray, a black, but when it's all said and done, you get the almighty, powerful, at least in their viewpoint, optic white taking place. Now, there's a little bit of figurative creativity license taking place, because if you have a can of white paint and you add 10 black drops of anything, what happens to that paint? It's going to change colors, and it's probably going to become more of a gray hint hue to it. And there's even the scene where Tim first messes up because he puts the wrong stuff in there. Kimbrough yells at him. Then he puts the stuff in, and Tim looks at the paint that's getting brushed on, and he's kind of concerned because when he looks at it, he sees a little bit like a gray speck hue kind of tint coming to it. Kimbrough looks at it and goes, perfect. That's good. And Kimbrough's worried about where that paint is going because this one is headed for it's government paint, which we know gets used for a variety of things. This is going to national monuments. Some other paint also goes to government, just in general. Doesn't have to be a monument, but government. Yeah, purposes, buildings. Pretty good chance that one of those buildings is the White House. And Tim even kind of starts to wonder, is this the same paint that they use at, and he's not sure, but could this be a similar paint, same paint that they use where else? Right? Yeah, it mentions school, the Golden Day, the bar or brothel even has white paint on it that he says is kind of starting to fleck off and whatnot. But it's possible, could this actually get used for his school? Which, remember, what is the paint job that's getting done at most of the buildings at the school? They have been whitewashed. Chapter 10 is certainly an extreme symbolic chapter that would be taking place. What's the argument that you can see from this that Ellison might be trying to shape?
Part of it would be, people like red, white, green, and orange, so being used everywhere, like kind of.
Okay, so that whole idea that white is right would be getting used everywhere, and it certainly would be getting support from what aspect of the nation? If the paint's getting used for national monuments, government buildings, potentially even schools, then who's supporting it? Indirectly, probably, but I mean, some certainly could be. But yeah, this is certainly most likely going to have some government sponsorship to it. The name Liberty Paints, alluding to Statue of Liberty, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We said that hey, if you put in black drops into white paint, it's going to make it gray. Why then have that be the key to having optic white? The opposite of what would naturally happen where you would expect it to be gray. Why have Ellison make it even brighter, whiter? How many drops? 10. Anyone want to take a guess what from a national population percentage, percentage of African Americans in the United States in 1950? It's 10%. How do we normally think of the United States when you think of like an object? Melting pot. What is a melting pot? It is a mixture. You bring in variety of ethnicities, races, gender, culture, viewpoints, religions, whatever you want to call it. Throw those things together and you get something better, something different. It's a mixture of all those things. What do you get when you put the 10% into the bucket? You don't get a mixture, you get optic white. What's happening to that 10%? They're getting whitewashed. They're getting absorbed. They're not being mixed in and creating a new culture. They are getting thrown into an existing culture and using that for that culture's benefit. Who came up with the slogan? Brockway. Black guy, living in the basement, works for the factory. No one else would know he's there. He comes up with the phrase. He gets $300 bonus, but he doesn't get like a royalty check that's going to come through every single year. What does Liberty Paint, what does the company basically do with him? Essentially, if they use him for their own benefit, you give him a little bit of money to keep him happy, then he is being exploited. He's being utilized, he's being used for that white benefit, and he's just going to kind of get thrown into the mix it up, but it's going to come out the way that we want it to be. There's certainly some symbolism that would be taking place, and I'd definitely say some criticism, elements of satire that Ellison would kind of be throwing in here, where he's kind of making fun, in a way, I would say, of that melting pot idea that we are not a mixture. But essentially, you have black culture or population is absorbed. If it's mixed, it works in helping come up with a different product. If it's absorbed, it gets consumed. 10 drops, 10 fighters at the beginning, white blindfold, white paint, kind of playing with those ideas here a little bit. Brockway does something for the benefit of the white company, and what does he get? Money. Have we seen that before? Who supports the stereotype for the whites? Specifically the white trustees. True Blood tells his story. Norton gives him money. We're kind of playing fast forward here a little bit. What does Tim get given from Jack? $300 to be, we don't know yet necessarily, but a spokesperson. He's going to speak for them. Jack is white, Tim is black, so there's some communist ideas that are going to kind of get brought in there. But you have True Blood, you have Brockway, you have Tim, all are getting paid to fulfill a certain role. Tim can't stand Brockway, and we know that because they get in a fight. Tim can't stand True Blood, and we know that because he basically curses him the whole time he's telling the story. But in some ways, Tim's not a whole lot different because he's going to get paid to kind of fulfill his little bit of a role. But with this absorbing that is taking place, it's certainly that idea that whitewashing of America, whitewashing of people in general, this isn't just an individual or just an institution like a school epidemic that would be taking place, but it goes on a much larger scale. And if a person isn't going to speak out or do something about it, then it's probably going to certainly continue. Brockway mentioned that we know this is the guy who works down in the basement of the building. What are other things that we know about Brockway? Like if you're just going to characterize him, come up with like a few descriptions, traits of Lucius Brockway, what would be some things to mention? Old. Aiden. Paranoid. Always worried about the Union. And he's certainly asking those line of questions to Tim. Excuse me. Stubborn. What's he responsible for? Basically, like making all the he's the guy at the literally the bottom who is doing the inner working so that the paint works. And then I kind of said, literally at the bottom because he lives in the basement. See any similarities? Paranoid, stubborn. Like Tim at the beginning / end, because it's like prologue Tim. Not in charge of white paint, but Tim's doing white light / power. We don't know how old he is. He certainly seems to be pretty stubborn. Maybe paranoid in a little bit of way that he has to live underground, and he's down in the basement. But what happens between young Tim and Brockway? Fisticuffs, fight. In a way, Tim's fighting himself. And he doesn't certainly realize it at the time, but he is fighting an identity of his. And again, you have a character who's struggling to try to find an identity. You take a look at Brockway, you take a look at Bledsoe, you take a look at Prologue Tim, you take a look at True Blood. There are certainly some traits that all 4 of those individuals at that point do, and really it could boil down to the vet's evidence or argument of play the game. They do things for themselves that are going to be a benefit, but it certainly can come at an expense of other people. Prologue Tim, we don't know his relations with other people, but he's by himself. He beats people up, describes himself as a phantom almost that's kind of mugging people. Bledsoe will exploit people of his own race for his own benefit. True Blood has no problem telling his story and fulfilling a stereotype, which is certainly very negative, but it's for his own benefit. Brockway lives down in the basement, gets paid a little bit of money, but he likes having that power of being in charge of something, even if he's going to be exploited. Young Tim comes across as being very naive, but there's certainly some kind of shift that takes place between Young Tim and Prologue Tim, where this guy abandons that naive, idealistic viewpoint and starts doing whatever he can to benefit himself. That doesn't mean he's wrong, but he certainly doesn't like Young Tim, this viewpoint that exists of those people, but we know he ends up kind of becoming like them. And Allison certainly plays around with that bucket idea where, no, we're not a melting pot, but we're more of a paint bucket. What's his graduation speech? Cast down your bucket. Bledsoe, remember the name that the kids call him, the students call him? Old Buckethead. And Tim still is out to get him with like the spittoon that he's going to dump on him when he thinks he sees him in the men's house and ends up being somebody else. So with that bucket, there's that idea of compromise. You're being absorbed. Cast down your bucket. You're not going to be fighting for rights, but you are going to be exploited by other people. So in some ways, really, the first half of the book, you have that criticism of that bucket idea. Jack, you could be the next Booker T. Washington, and Tim goes, no, I want to be someone greater. I want to be better than the Booker T. Washington figure. So there's kind of like a little bit of shift that would try to take place from him as a leader. You have the fight take place. Brockway kind of sabotages the machines. So you end up having Tim being sent to the hospital, which, keep in mind, is part of the factory. So it's still a Liberty Paints hospital. When he wakes up, what are some things that he notices? Surroundings, sights, sounds, what he can do, what he can't do, where he's at.
He doesn't remember a whole lot about himself, like he can't even say his name.
Okay, so name, identity, all of those things are still a big, it doesn't look like a question mark, but question mark. The doctors are around, and the doctors are certainly racist doctors. They're talking about lobotomy, electrocution, like we kind of had with electric shock therapy from Cuckoo's Nest. You will, in like the vets in the golden day in the South, 1930s, you did have medical experiments that were getting used on a lot of minority groups who were considered expendable, especially if they were in asylums, mental hospitals, things like that. So Ellison's probably alluding to that kind of stuff that would happen. It almost reminds, of like Holocaust, doctor experiments, things like that. So certainly not there for the benefit of the patient. Kind of similar in some ways to the battle royale that would be taking place. Object, something that we can use, not something that we necessarily have to worry about. What else? Carol? Yeah, he's like in some kind of glass box or case. He's confined. What's like kind of stuck to him? There's some, he doesn't know what they're going to do, but nodes, tubes, like kind of, medical devices that are hooked up to him. There's one that's attached to his stomach that he makes reference to. Remember anything he hears? There's like symphony music in the background. And then there's another person, he doesn't know who, but there's a person besides the doctors that he hears. Remember what kind of voice? He hears a female. She's not talking, but she is, like a screaming, crying kind of. If you don't know who you are, you're in a glass box, tube coming out of you, especially your stomach. I don't know how much music would be playing in the background, but a woman crying, and you're in a hospital. You could find that on a lot of hospitals today, right now. I've been there twice. Technically 3 times, I guess. You're in an incubator. Doctors are around you, female screaming in the background, being tested, almost like an umbilical cord. For Tim, it's not just a birth, but it would be a rebirth, new Tim moving forward.